In application of the above conclusions to a recent event I experienced, I saw Colorado citizens treated as children. I was invited to participate in a public parade on St. Patrick's Day by a person holding a permit for himself and me and others to do so, and I was in a standing position, verbally silent, when an unidentified person ordered me to get out of the parade and off the public street. I don't usually do that in a public place. I asked who he was and pointed out the permit holder to him, whereupon a swarm of persons dressed as policemen, refusing to identify themselves and ordering and forcing people off the street, began pushing people around. At the same time, when I asked them to identify themselves and give me a reason why they were acting in such a disruptive way, they refused. By this time, I sat down on the street, feeling weak, in order to get out of the chaos around me, having remained as well to help other individuals who were being roughed up when my turn came. They picked me up off my feet, bent my arms swiftly back, handcuffed me and pulled me off the street, putting me under arrest, during which time my blood pressure soared to 180 over 110. That's a stroke level. My pulse became irregular and my fingers were bruised in the process. I hold no animosity towards the police officer who did this. I know his name, and he happens to be the police officer who I worked with very well to get the permit for the rally on Sunday the next day. That's not the point. The point has to do for me as an attorney and as a philosopher with the manner in which things happened and which they could have been avoided from happening. Is this the way we want our public safety officers to act in an American democracy and would want our children to emulate them as role models? These are the deeper than legal, the philosophical questions of truth we need to ponder. As Thomas Jefferson said, to secure these rights, governments are instituted. In the Declaration of Independence, everybody remembers the first paragraph about inalienable rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and those are quoted in self-evident rights of mankind, where he should have said human beings. And the very next sentence says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted. That's the first purpose of me, of you, and this institution. And we know what those rights are. They're the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments in regard to this case. And they do not evaporate by a facade of privacy claimed in a public place. We keep our rights to exercise wherever we go as Americans, in this country and out, regardless of how people react to them. And I am reminded of the words of Attorney Welch in the McCarthy hearings when he asked Senator Joe McCarthy, for whom the infamous term McCarthyism was coined, "Have you any decency, sir?" So I ask you today, must decency and dignity die in the streets of Colorado Springs? Or can not only the Pikes Peak Justice and Peace Commission, but the ACLU, as well as the City Council, police, city attorney's office, peace activists everywhere, cooperate together to restore our decency, dignity, and civility, so that we once again, all of us, may hold these values in common and pledge to practice them in the future. I want to close with just a couple of points that came up in the very excellent presentations that I sat listening to until I was finally able to come up here. One has to do with the document of items of consensus. I notice, and I think Mr. Purvis is an attorney, and perhaps some others, one to my right, we have a document here that is purported to be agreed to. Now, if I came to you, to the City Council, and this became a document that you agreed to, I don't think it would be without signatures or without date. or without the names of the parties who agreed to this. I undertook to trace this because I know nothing about it, being the program peace director of the Pikes Peak Justice and Peace Commission. And my predecessor, Dennis Applewan, does not know about it either. It goes back to some knowledge of something being done, as was mentioned earlier, in 2003. And as Deputy Chief Leibowitz, I believe, has minutes on this with names on it. Some of those names are Gene Ferguson, Dorothy Slager, former executive director. Mary's brother phrase may have been on there. And in any case, I called to Vermont because Gene Ferguson was the main planner for the 2003 event. And she could recall no final document or nothing agreed to. And so it seems to me as an attorney, what we have here are minutes taken by the police of this joint meeting, which I consider to be a plus, and then a summary called items of consensus, which were the summary of those minutes, but they're not a joint document. And they were not agreed to, and the document themselves says the Justice and Peace Commission representatives want to note that they still disagree with some police tactics at the rally and would welcome further inquiry. So the document itself indicates that something further is needed, and I hope that's what we can do now. We have a document that you remember, we remember, the police remember, by putting our signatures to it and dating it and making a record of it and put it in someone else's file. As far as tasers are concerned, I know very little about them, but I heard that police officers, when in imminent danger, have a right to use them in order to defend themselves. The only instance I know that day is that an officer put a taser in my wife's face when she was pleading with him to tell him that I've had a heart attack, my blood pressure can soar under these conditions, not expecting them to happen when I entered the parade, and could she come to my help? And that's when the taser came out, and she has some hard feelings about that. It's not here today. Social issues. One of the things that were brought up in this so-called private parade in the public place where we were not supposed to be, that we didn't know, but before we got started, I saw little children and parents both dressed in war outfits, entered the parade, marched in the parade ahead of us, and were welcomed by people. And by the way, there were people who applauded us as we went along. And there are also people who called up the Justice and Peace Commission, quite a number that wished to be witnesses and to tell us their story in support. So I don't think the numbers are going to be the majority vote on the thing. And I don't think this political forum is going to be the final answer. I think the constitutional history of the United States and the wedding we have to American democracy is going to justify not us, but the First, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Durland. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to comment?